She's a graduate of the Institute of Company Directors. She's a FACN. She's a MAPNA. I'm not sure what a MAPNA is, Aletha, but you are one. Please join me in welcoming Aletha Ward.
Thank you. I think my mic is working.
Yes.
I'll tell you what, I'm nervous this morning, which I usually don't get, and I'll tell you why I'm nervous. I'm hoping that I can read this screen with my glasses on. so bear with me. All right, I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands and waterways on which we're meeting today. But I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge that First Nations' relationship with country is actually based on reciprocity and responsibility. So I commit to embracing First Nations' wisdom, guidance in building planetary health. All right, so today I'm going to speak to you about why we need to move beyond tokenism and why planetary health shouldn't be just an afterthought or an optional add-on, but actually a core element of nursing practice for our education and our professional identity. I had quite a few slides to show to you today, graphs and facts and policy positions, but instead I want to start with a story that changed how I approach this keynote today. And like the very best of reflections, it came quietly during a wine that I was having with a friend recently. He's a nurse, one of the old guard, who's seen more than most: wars, pandemics, system failures, political upheaval. Yet for 54 years he has shown up. Not 54 years of age, 54 years as a nurse. Every day to be a nurse. So I shared with him what I wanted to achieve today in this talk and what I'd like you to take away. And yes, so I'm having difficulty reading this. I'm just going to go back over here. So he told me a story, and this was his story. There was once a small insect trapped inside of a glass jar. It buzzed and it scrambled, desperate to escape, to reach the world outside. But he couldn't quite reach it. He kept slipping down that glass jar. So he thought, well, I'm going to have to try a different tactic. So he took a run up, charging up the inside of that glass jar. But unfortunately, he slipped back down. So then he thought, well, maybe I just need a bit more grip. So this time he climbed really carefully, pressing against the side of the glass, clinging on with all of his might, but still he slipped. Finally, exhausted and struggling, he turned around, and in that moment of stillness, of perhaps giving up, he realised something. He was never inside the glass jar. He was on the outside, looking in. He'd just been looking the wrong way. It was all about perspective. He hadn't turned around and looked at the 360-degree view. So that story changed everything for me. And you in this keynote, actually, because I realised that I was climbing the outside of that glass jar, pushing, striving, trying to scale the enormity of our planetary health challenges. But when I stopped, when I actually sat down and turned around, I saw something that I've never really paused to look at before. I saw us. I saw our profession. I saw nurses. Not as a workforce to mobilise or a system to reform, but as people, as nurses, as the backbone of healthcare, exhausted perhaps, but still standing, still turning up, still carrying the lamp. So today, I plan to walk you through a series of slides. Let's see if I can see these ones. All right. I was going to start with what planetary health is, how it reflects that deep interconnectedness between human health, the health of other species, and the natural systems that sustain us. I was going to explain how our well-being is intimately tied to the air that we breathe, the water we drink, the food that we grow, and the stability of the climate that we live in. I was then going to speak about this, the triple planetary crisis: climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, three interlinked forces that are just destabilising our ecosystems, but not only that, compounding each other to create a profound and lasting health impacts for our generation and generations to come. I was going to show you that these aren't just environmental issues, these are health issues, they're social justice issues, they're nursing issues. I was going to show you this, how we've crossed most of the Earth's planetary boundaries, the limits that keep our natural systems in balance, boundaries that regulate climate stability, biodiversity, freshwater use, land systems and chemical pollution, and how each breach edges us closer to a tipping point that can cause irreversible harm, not just to our ecosystems, but to the very conditions that make human life possible. I was going to show you this, that the ambition of a 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature increase, which was once the rallying cry of climate policy, is now officially out of reach. That even keeping to a 2 degrees Celsius increase will demand nothing short of heroic, systemic and immediate action. And that the path that we're currently on actually leads us to a 3-degree increase. And that's just not abstract modelling. The IPCC chair himself warned that 3 degrees would bring severe, irreversible impacts and that we may no longer be able to adapt in time. It is a threat to human civilization. This isn't rhetoric, this is consensus. Over 95% of climate scientists agree. And when science reaches this level of clarity, we must, as a health profession grounded in an evidence base, ask, what is our professional responsibility now? I was then going to speak to this, the growing, direct and devastating health impacts of the triple planetary crisis. I was going to talk about the patients presenting to emergency departments with heat stroke and dehydration, not in the outback, but in our suburbs. The resurgence of mosquito-borne diseases in places that they've never heard of them before. I was going to talk about mental health and the climate anxiety and trauma following floods, bushfires, cyclones, and how that's becoming a silent epidemic, let alone the increase in respiratory and cardiac conditions triggered by worsening air quality, heat waves, and stress on our already fragile healthcare systems. This isn't abstract. This is already in your work, in our work. In fact, the front line of climate change is actually in your clinic, your hospital, and your community. I was going to walk you through the drivers, so how global warming, pollution, waste, biodiversity loss, they're not random phenomena. We have caused them. Human beings have caused them. I was going to be clear with you that it's our continued reliance on fossil fuels that is heating the planet, polluting the air we breathe, and placing lives at risk. And this is beyond political rhetoric. This is science. This is the evidence base. I was then going to show you this, that even as we work to heal others, our own healthcare system's contributing to the harm. I was going to explain that healthcare is responsible for around 5% of global greenhouse emissions, that every energy-hungry hospital, every plastic-wrapped sterile item, every face mask, it all has its own carbon footprint. And I was going to say that if global healthcare was a country, it would be the 5th largest emitting country on Earth. So if we are serious about protecting health, we must start by reducing the footprint of the system meant to deliver it. But it's not just about mitigation. I was going to speak about adaptation because the reality is climate change is no longer a future threat. It is here now and it is reshaping the care that we're delivering. I was going to show you how nurses are already leading the way. You saw some of them today with our award recipients. And we're leading the way in climate resilient policy, in vulnerability screening, in disaster response, in curriculum reform, and in green infrastructure. But you don't want to hear that. It's a terrible thing to hear. And I'm going to be really honest with you. I don't want to keep saying it. It's a terrible thing to have to say. And many of you may have already heard these facts and figures from myself or my colleagues over the last 5 years or all of the reports that we refer to. And yet nothing makes hearing this easier. So that's why when I stopped climbing that glass jar and I sat down, when I turned around and stopped staring so hard at the crisis ahead, I instead looked squarely at us, at our profession. And here's the truth. We are now asking the world's largest profession, nurses, 500,000 of us in Australia, who have been in the trenches for the last 6 years, holding together systems under extraordinary strain, weary, burnt out, to respond in strength and solidarity to what the World Health Organization states is the largest challenge of our generation, and what the world scientists are calling a code red for humanity. But I know who we're speaking to. I know who I'm speaking to today. I'm speaking to a proud, strong, potentially weary, but evidence-based profession. I don't need to convince you that this is real. You've seen it, you've felt it, you've experienced it in your workplaces, you've seen it on TV. You have access to the evidence base. So, to be honest with you, I have no doubt at all that planetary health will be embedded in our education and practice standards. It simply has to be, because never before have we ever worked or lived or cared in a world like this. But the truth is, planetary health is already embedded in nursing. It is woven through the FACN Code of Ethics, a code that reminds us that our duty of care extends not only to individuals, but to communities and to our future generations. It is embedded in these newly adopted global definitions of nursing and a nurse that Jill presented to us yesterday. And can I say, if Jill is here, I feel like reading this and understanding what you've done here is the first time I really feel seen and heard as a nurse. These definitions formally acknowledge our broader responsibilities, not just to individual patients, but to population health, planetary health, and health system design. This expanded definition doesn't just give us permission, it gives us a mandate to advocate for investment in nursing education, in climate leadership, and in advanced roles that can respond to our changing world. Let's take a moment to actually look at this language. It is clear, it is unapologetic, and it places us exactly where we need to be, at the centre of compassionate, justice-driven, future-focused healthcare. A profession dedicated to upholding everyone's rights to the highest attainable standard of health, including access to safe, sustainable environments. A profession that manages and leads health systems, that is grounded in ethical standards, scientific knowledge, and commitment to social justice. Honestly, if this isn't planetary health, I don't know what is. And the State of the World's Nursing Report tells us what we must do. This 2025 report is clear. Nurses aren't just responders to crisis, we are drivers of systemic change. Our profession is in the midst of a profound transformation, and the world is watching us lead it. This report calls on governments, institutions and leaders to position nurses at the centre of climate-conscious care, policy advocacy and health education. It demands that our standards, our education, regulation and scope of practice evolve urgently to reflect the realities of planetary health. And it highlights what many of us have been calling for: strategic investment in leadership, education and governance. Not just so we can respond to the crisis, but so we can shape what comes next. This isn't just an opportunity, this is a responsibility. So here we are. We find ourselves at a juncture, a moment in time that asks more of us than ever before. The time for professional transformation is no longer on the horizon, it is here now. The question is, how do we, as a profession, step up and meet this crisis with clarity, courage and care? How do we look under the hood and really examine where we are now, not just in our politics, policies or curricula, but in our collective readiness, our energy, our professional identity. How do we move forward not just because we're expected to, but because we choose to? Distinguished Professor Tracy Levitt-Jones led this world-leading work last year to define a new concept called planetary empathy. Many of you may have heard her speak yesterday. What this work and an emerging body of research suggests is quite compelling. Nurses who demonstrate empathy not just for people but for the planet may be more inclined to take action, to advocate, to lead, to step into the challenge. And as I look at these 5 R's of planetary empathy, reflection, reciprocity, recognition, responsibility and response, I see something more. I see a mirror held up to our profession. Perhaps these aren't just the steps for understanding planetary health. Perhaps these are the very steps we need to take to care for and empower ourselves as a profession, as a workforce, as human beings. It starts with honest reflection on who we are, on why this matters, on what we're carrying and what might be getting in the way of moving forward. We need reciprocity, not just with nature, but with each other. To care for colleagues with the same depth and determination we offer our patients. It comes with recognition of our own biases, of systemic barriers, of the ways we've been shaped by the structures we now must reform. Then responsibility for how we use our voice, our platform, and our influence. And finally, response. Grounded not in guilt or exhaustion or because we have to respond, but in clarity, compassion and conviction. Because we cannot fully respond to the planet until we first respond to each other, to ourselves. I don't have all the answers, but I do have something just as important: hope. And that hope is not abstract because it's anchored in you. It's anchored in us as nurses. In this profession that has risen through fire, flood, pandemic, reform again and again. And that is why I keep showing up and I keep driving forward this conversation. Because I believe in our profession with every part of me. I believe we have what it takes to lead clearly, firmly, and with integrity. If we are to move beyond tokenism, then yes, we must embed planetary health into our practice and education standards. It's actually not negotiable. It is the only way that we can prepare our workforce to live and work in a world that is shifting beneath our feet. But embedding this on paper is not enough. If we are to truly move beyond tokenism, we must first turn inward. We must reconnect with our purpose, our values, and each other as a nursing profession. So let us refuel the lamp, not just for the path ahead, but for those walking beside us. Thank you.
Leave it over there. Thank you. Oh, gosh, thank you, Aletha. That was absolutely fabulous. I look forward to some more wisdom from you when we get to the question and answer section. I'd now like to present our next